Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of 3D Solutions for Practical Problems. And we don't have much of a problem to solve here today, as this episode is going to be a sort of fun one. And because today we're going to be modeling a set of D&D dices, so like high fantasy and stuff like that. And this request came from a friend who seems really passionate about this kind of stuff, so this goes out to them. And but to actually start modeling, and so as with any project, we have to look at our references first. And so there are a bunch of dices or die that we're going to look to be modeling. Actually, no. What this episode is going to aim to shoot for is to teach you how to model your own dice, so you can go crazy and go crazy to model a dice with however many faces you want. But we're gonna start with something basic where we're gonna model a d6, and following that example, we're gonna model like a d20 right at the end of this video. So here are our references, and to actually start modeling is, as always, delete the default cube. But actually, no, since we're gonna be starting with a d6, the cube itself is going to be fine. So before anything, we of course want our numbers to show up first. So let's get a set of our numbers first. And how we can get our numbers is by before we go on, I gotta turn on my annotation so you can follow along here too. Okay. So to get our numbers in there, we want to press Shift A to add while we're in object mode, and we want to add a text in there. And with our text, we can edit our text by entering edit mode by pressing Tab. And of course, you don't want the word text to appear on any of the faces of this cube. So we want to set it to have the numbers following the numbers of the cube. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but and all that. But say you wanted to add a font in there, so you can personalize this cube to be your own. And you can do that by going to the side context menu here, and under the drop down font, you can you want to go to regular, because that's the regular font that Blender defaults to, and just choosing whatever font Windows already comes pre-installed with, or Mac if you're coming from there. But what I'm going to be choosing is Arial Black for our demonstration. So it applies the font to what we've already typed out. So yeah, we just want to give ourselves a set of numbers to work with, so that we can use these numbers later to paste it onto each face of this cube. And since later we're going to be modeling a d20, we want to get all the numbers in there. So all the numbers up to 20. So just like how you would type into any text interface, you have the basic controls like space bar, enter to add a new line. Okay, so just gave ourselves these numbers here. And next, we want to separate those numbers so we can lay them out one by one individually. And right now, they're grouped up all together. And how we can solve that first is that this is a type field right now. So when I enter edit mode, it prompts me to type. And we want to give ourselves vertices for these numbers to work with. So you want to convert them to a shape or a mesh, and there's a thing that does just that. So right-clicking with while we're in edit mode, right-clicking onto our object or our text in this case, right-clicking into our object, finding the drop-down, convert to, and clicking mesh. So that now when we click on it, we have all this geometry that we can work with. And so that gives us that, but they're all kind of wonky right now. But that's for later. All like the geometry is like all weird. and kind of unworkable at this state. But that's for later, because for now we want to separate these. So how we can do that is by, with our object selected in object mode, we want to go to edit mode now with our vertices in working order, and selecting all and separating them by loose parts. So each object becomes its own selectable piece of object. And they're kind of in a mess right now. Like, as you see in this collection, the text or the number doesn't really align to the text that they display here. And just to make things easier for ourselves in the future, let's rename these objects and merge them while we're at it. So starting with 20, we want to merge these two together so that they just become one object. So instead of selecting them all as one, or that could work too, but the point is that we want to select both of them and merge them so that they become one object. So as before, Control J so that they become one object. You can move them around as one. And after we merge them, if you want to rename them, you can hit F2 and just type in whatever you want to name it. So in this case, it'll be 20. And so you just want to repeat that process, running down the numbers. So Control J, F2 to rename, 19. So I just want to do that for the rest of these numbers following up. And now that we reach the numbers that are sort of by themselves, we can just straight up rename them as they are without having to join them to anything. Alright, that should have it. All of our objects are in orderly shape. We're getting ready to paste these objects in front of this cube. But before we get to that, we have something weird going on here, where all of our objects seem to share a similar origin, and that's this little orange dot here. So you can see that when we rotate like any of these objects, they seem to revolving around that one origin, and it gets worse way out here because with our origin being over there and our 20 out here, yeah, we get that result. So from here, we want to reassign these origins to the center of all these numbers. And how we can do that is by selecting them all, pressing right click, going under the set origin drop down, and selecting origin to center of mass surface. So now we can see that these origins are now centered as they should be, where then when we rotate them, we're not getting that weird arc that we saw with the 20 here. Alright, and that should have it for this. Now we want to set up our cube to be ready for modeling. And how I like to set this up is by giving ourselves geometry or points to snap these numbers to. So what I like to do is add a subdivision surface, set it to simple, and seeing our results, we want to set that to wireframe. So we want to see how that looks. Wireframe geometry. And actually before that, I also like to add a bit of a bevel so we can split things up like that and give it more definition. And adjust this bevel to however much you want, but this should be a good number for me. Alright, and that does it for our cube for now. Where next we want to put these numbers onto that cube. So how we want to approach that is by going up here to our snapping options and selecting vertex and making sure the snap width is at center and aligning the rotation to whatever faces this cube faces to. And so with our snapping set up, we can turn that on now and select these numbers and just start laying them out one by one. So with the D6 having 6 sides, we're going to be using numbers 1 through 6, and where we can just start duplicating them and placing them on top of this cube. And if you want to rotate them, you can rotate. If you want to if you want to rotate them to face upwards, you can click rotate, but you notice that it rotates perpendicular to your view. So in that case, you want to rotate by hitting Z twice, so it bounds to whatever face it's getting projected upon. So that in that case, that's this square here. That's the face of this cube here. Yeah. So demonstrating that again, rotate Z twice, and what I do is I hold control so it snaps to 5-degree increments so it stays upright. Alright, and so we're on our third number. Now we wanna move on to number 4. Again, Shift D to duplicate, hitting hitting R first, then Z twice, then rotating them along an axis, along the local Z axis. Again, for this back face, you can do that. But say you didn't want to rotate manually like this by rotating your cursor around, you could also just RZ Z and then rotate by however degrees you want. So I typed in 180, and so it did just that. It rotated 180 degrees around. So that does it for our 6th face. Again, I'm gonna duplicate that here, and I think I want it rotated 90 degrees along this way. And how I can tell if I'm rotated 90 degrees is with this rotation thing up here in the top left. But we're good now, so we want to leave it as that. Alright, so our numbers are looking good, but now our geometry is kind of wonky. And we want to fix that, so our operation, which we're going to carve these numbers into the cube, it's so that that operation can behave correctly. And so by setting up our numbers here, we want to get a better view of this. So we can hit Shift Z to enter wireframe mode, where now we want to add a modifier that first off solidifies it, so we can carve in to this cube. And we can tell by how much we've solidified by hitting Alt Z to enter X-ray mode and making sure that the shape overlaps a bit with the object. So that would mean adjusting our offset here. But say if you wanted to just create a cube with its number sticking out, you would set that offset all the way to 1. But in our case, we want to have this 1 eventually carve in to this cube or to this dice. Alright, and so it's intersected a bit, where now we want to give it a bit more thickness, however much thickness you want. But now after that, now comes to where we actually fix the geometry. And it's kind of weird right now, but that's because we haven't selected sharp yet. And so we get more clean faces. We have quads, and quads are really easy to work with, and quads are faces or a shape, or a face that has 4 edges and 4 corners. And for our settings, we can leave it as it is, but the important thing is to adjust your octree depth to however well your computer can handle it. But of course, you don't want to have too less detail or too much that your computer can crash. So 4 is a good number. And that does it for that. Where now we want to apply these similar modifiers to what we did for the number 1. And there's a quick way to do that, actually. So before doing that, we want to select all of our objects, excluding the cube, but then selecting our 1 last to set it as our active object. So our active object being all these objects which will copy their attributes to the object we selected last, that being the number 1. Where now next we want to hit Control L so we can link our modifiers to that number 1, and we got our modifiers applied to each of these numbers to the side. So now looking back to how that looks, and it all looks good. And right, that does it for that step. But our numbers are kind of looking like small right now on the face. And if you wanted to make that bigger, you can S to scale, Shift Z, so it scales in everything but the Z axis. But we want to make it local to each of these numbers, so Shift Z again. So now we can get this, and you can drag to however large or small you want your numbers to be. So this for me would be a good size. And now that we have our numbers set up, we want to get ready to carve these numbers into the cube. So before that happens, we want to apply all of these modifiers first. So all of these, so we can work with them later. And how we can do that, a quick way to apply all of these modifiers at once is right-clicking again to the Object Context menu and converting them to a mesh. And I don't know how that does it, but we can see now that all of our modifiers are applied. But now, after that, we want to join all of these objects together at once, so they just become one object and not separate objects. And as before, we can do that by selecting all of our objects and Control J to join them all. So now that we just have one object. Alright, and now heading out of X-ray mode, we want to add a Boolean operator or Boolean modifier to our cube. But before then, I think we can apply our modifiers here now. Where now, after our modifiers are applied, we want to set our Boolean operator to be set to difference with our object applied on this, and we can tell if the Boolean is working if by X-ray mode you can see where the cut starts and ends. So that's a pretty deep cut, but whenever you're ready, you want to now apply this modifier and see our results. Alright, and there's that cube ready to be modeled. But say you want to model a way more complex object, and that's what we're going to be doing now, is that we're going to be modeling our D20. Alright, and so just setting our cube aside, before we want to model our D20, because this is a pretty complex shape we can't model on our own. Thankfully, Blender has an add-on that gives you just those shapes. So going to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and looking for extra objects. And that just gives you extra objects to play with when you add, Shift A to add a mesh, and you get all this these extra menus down here. And what we want to look for is to get this isohedral sort of shape, is that again we want to add a mesh, and with our add-on now added, go under math function, select regular solid, and there will be this drop down here that allows you to select what kind of solid you have. And so as this D20 takes on the shape of an icosahedron or icosahedron, we want to select that. And so right out of the gate, we have this shape ready to be modeled on. All right, and again, how do we put these numbers in there? If you remember, we want to give ourselves vertex or snapping points for these numbers to snap on. And how I usually like to do it, again, is to give myself a bit of a bevel, so it serves a dual purpose, as in giving our shape more definition and allowing our subdivision surface to work. So we can check if that works by going here. And if this goes before and after. Okay. So the order is important here. And as in here, we want to set our subdivision to be on top of our bevel, because it looks like, because the modifier menu works from top to down, it's applying this the bevel first before subdividing, whereas we want to subdivide and bevel next. And so we can, this is ready now for modeling. These points here in the center are what we're going to be snapping these numbers onto. And since this icosahedron has 20 sides, we have our 20 numbers, and now we can just get ready to snap them onto them, snap these numbers onto these faces. And just making sure we have our vertex snapping on, snap with center, and aligning our rotation to target. Alright, and where now we can just drag and drop, Shift D to duplicate, and then just moving them onto there. Our number is looking a bit too big for this, so let's roll back and just scale this up. Okay, and if you're worried about the numbers being too big or too small for the shape or the faces, again, there's that way of scaling each number relative to their local face. You know, shift or scale, shift Z, shift Z again, so we can get that local scaling. But as for now, I'm just filling in these faces, where if we take a look at here, number 10 is a bit out of alignment of the face it's supposed to be in, and it seems that whenever we move it around, it doesn't stick to the face. And there are a few ways to solve that, and one of them is this: grabbing them and hitting Shift Z, so that Shift Z again actually, so that it moves relative to its local coordinates. That would mean that it would move locally in the X and Y axis, except the Z. So we're now allowed to move that at will without having it in this case here, where it doesn't snap to the face. Okay, so now let's roll that back, and that's actually a good snap right there. So going back to duplicating, moving any objects that we find are out of alignment. So G, Shift Z, moving them manually. Okay, make sure that your vertex snapping is on all the while. and it looks like the origin is out of alignment here. But as I showed you, if you want to make random or manual adjustments, you just want to press G, Shift Z, Shift Z to make to recenter it manually. And where's our 20th side? Oh, looks like we have a duplicate around here. It's gonna take me a while. Huh, okay, I found it. We have 2 7s. And there we have it. All of our numbers onto this icosahedron. And if you remember, what happens next is going up to one of these numbers, hitting Shift Z, getting ready to add our modifiers in there. So if the order should go that we solidify first, following up with a remesh that is set to sharp with an octree depth of 4. And let's give it a bit of thickness as well, and adjusting the offset so that it overlaps with the face of the shape a bit, so you can see it moving forward just a tad. Okay, now with our modifiers applied on one number, we want to take a look at all these other numbers and copy the modifiers onto them as well. So like before, we want to select all of these numbers, excluding the icosahedron, then selecting our number 6 with the properties applied, and hitting Ctrl L to copy your modifiers and link them so that it applies to the rest of these other objects as well. So if you're missing like a number or two for one of these numbers that have an extra digit, you'll have to just go in manually and remove the disconnected. And looks like we don't have any more missing numbers. How about this? I think we're good. Okay. Alright. And now, what next is that we apply all of these modifiers at once. That would mean selecting all, deselecting the icosahedron, and then right-clicking and selecting Convert to Mesh. And while we're here, let's join them all up. Well, now we should just have one object with all the numbers applied to it. Going back here now, applying all of our previous modifiers, then going on to add a new one, setting it as difference with our object assigned to this. Let's see if our booleans are working. Alright, so they're intersecting a bit here. You can see where the carve starts and ends. So we're going to have that deep of a carve here with this boolean modifier applied. Alright, and now whenever you're ready, you want to hit apply and see our work come into fruition. We can just leave this here or delete it, however you want to use it. And there you have it, our DnD dice. Now, these principles that I've showed you apply to however many faces of a die you want. So say that we have our icosphere. I think it's pretty big. Right there, yeah. We could have just added an icosphere right here and then natively from Blender. But say, let's hide this for now. So H to hide. Adding an icosphere. where you can play around with the subdivisions, but I don't even know how many faces this object has. But however, whatever I just taught you could be applied to this object right here, where it could have like hundreds of faces of a die. And if you want to go extreme with it, I don't even know how this die would work. It probably wouldn't even be a die, but you can make a dice out of anything, basically, out of any basic shape. Either it be really complex, such a where you could have like all of these shapes here. The same principles apply. Dodecahedron, right? That's a cool shape. And yeah, you can turn this into this with these numbers, using whatever fonts you want to turn and make your own die. And now, yeah, that should have it. Thanks for watching, and go on to make your own die.